Alright, good morning. I'm continuing on with Spinoza, and here I am with the essence of Spinoza's thought selected by Arnold Zwieg from The Improvement of the Understanding of Ethics. Improvement of the Understanding Ethics. Okay. Yay! Hopefully you can hear me very good. Works of Baruch de Spinoza, 1632 through 1677. Treatise on the Improvement of the Understanding, 1662. Short Treatise on God, Man, and His Well-Being, 1662. Principles of Cartesian Philosophy, together with Metaphysical Thoughts, 1663. I'll just read them. Ethics, 1662 through 1675. Theological Political Treaty, 1670. Compendium of Hebrew Grammar, 1670 through 1677. Tract on the Rainbow, published 1687. The Calculation of Chances, published 1883. Yay! Alright, so I'm going to just go ahead and call this one on the Improvement of Understanding. Oh, these are going to be all of them, isn't it? Alright. Introducing the works of Baruch de Spinoza. On the improvement of understanding. After experience had taught me that all usual surroundings of social life are vain and futile, seeing that none of the objects of my fears contain in themselves anything either good or bad, except in so far as the mind is affected by them, I finally resolved to inquire whether there might be some real good having power to communicate itself, which would affect the mind singly, to the exclusion of all else, whether in fact there might be anything of which the discovery of attainment would enable me to enjoy continuous, supreme, and unending happiness. I say I finally resolved, for at first sight it seemed unwise willingly to lose hold what was sure for the sake of something then uncertain. I could see the benefits which are acquired through fame and riches, and that I should be obliged to abandon the quest of such objects if I seriously devoted myself to a search for something different and new. I perceived that if true happiness chanced to be placed in the former, I should necessarily miss it, while if, on the other hand, if I were not so placed, and I gave them my whole attention, I should equally fail. I therefore debated whether it would fail. I therefore debated whether it would not be possible to arrive at the new principle, or at any rate a certainty concerning its existence, without changing the conduct and usual plan of my life, and the pleasures of the sense. With these three, the mind is so absorbed that it has little power to reflect on any different good. By sensual pleasure, the mind is enthralled to the extent of quiescence, as if the supreme good were actually attained, so that it is quite incapable of thinking of any other object. When such pleasure has been gratified, it is followed by extreme melancholy, whereby the mind though not enthralled, is disturbed and dulled. The pursuit of honors and riches is likewise very absorbing, especially if such objects be sought simply for their own sake, inasmuch as they are then supposed to constitute the highest good. In the case of fame and mind, in case of fame, in the case of fame, the mind is still more absorbed. Your fame is conceived as always good for its own sake, and as the ultimate end to which all actions are directed. Further, the attainment of riches and fame is not followed, as in the case of sensual pleasures, by repentance, but the more we acquire, the greater is our delight, and consequently, the more we are incited to increase both the one and the other. On the other hand, if our hopes happen to be frustrated, we are plunged into the deepest sadness. Fame has the further drawback that it compels its votaries to order their lives according to the opinions of their fellow men, shunning what they usually shun, and seeking what they usually seek. When I saw that all these ordinary objects of desire would be obstacles in a way of search for something different and new, nay, that they were so opposed thereto, that either they or it would have to be abandoned, I was forced to inquire which would prove the most useful to me, for, as I say, I seemed to be willingly losing hold on a sure good for the sake of something uncertain. However, after I had reflected on the matter, I came in the first place to the conclusion that by abandoning the ordinary objects of pursuit, and betaking myself to a new quest, I should be leaving a good, uncertain by reason of its own nature, as may be gathered from what has been said, for the sake of good not uncertain in its nature, for I sought for a fixed good, but only in the possibility of its attainment. Further reflection convinced me that if I could really get to the root of the matter, I should be leaving certain evils for a certain good. I thus perceived that I was in a state of great peril, and I compelled myself to seek with all my strength for a remedy, however uncertain it might be, as a sick man struggling with a deadly disease. When he sees that death will surely be upon him unless a remedy be found, is compelled to seek such a remedy with all his strength, inasmuch as his whole hope lies therein. All the objects pursued by the multitude, not only bringing no remedy that tends to preserve our being, but even act as hindrances, causing the death not seldom of those who possess them, and always of those who are possessed by them. There are many examples of men who have suffered persecution even to death for the sake of their riches, and of men in pursuit of wealth have exposed themselves to so many dangers, that they have paid away their life as a penalty for their folly. Examples are no less numerous of men who have endured the utmost wretchedness for the sake of gaining or preserving their reputation. Lastly, there are innumerable cases of men who have hastened their death through overindulgence in sensual pleasure. All these evils seem to have arisen from the fact that happiness or unhappiness is made wholly to depend on the quality of the object which we love. When a thing is not loved, no quarrels will arise concerning it. No sadness will be felt if it perishes. No envy if it is possessed by another. No fear, no hatred. In short, no disturbances of the mind. All these arise from the love of what is. All of these arise from the love of what is perishable, such as the objects already mentioned. But love toward a thing eternal and infinite feeds the mind wholly with joy, and is itself unmingled with any sadness, wherefore it is greatly to be desired and sought for with all our strength. Yet it was not at random that I used the words, if I could go to the root of the matter, for though what I have urged was perfectly clear to my mind, I could not forthwith lay aside all love of riches, sensual enjoyment, and fame. One thing was evident, namely, that while my mind was employed with these thoughts, it turned away from its former objects of desire, and seriously considered the search for a new principle. This state of things was a great comfort to me. For I perceived that the evils were not such as to resist all remedies, although these intervals were at first rare and of very short duration, yet afterward, as the true good became more and more discernible to me, they became more frequent and more lasting, especially after I had recognized that the acquisition of wealth, sensual pleasure, or fame is only a hindrance, so long as they are sought as ends, not as means. If they be sought as means, they will be under restraint, and, far from being hindrances, will further not a little the end for which they are sought, as I will show in due time. I will here only briefly state what I mean by true good, and also what is the nature of the highest good. In order that this may be rightly understood, we must bear in mind that the terms good and evil are only applied relatively, so that the same thing may be called both good and bad according to the relations in view, in the same way as it may be called perfect or imperfect. Nothing regarded in its own nature can be called perfect or imperfect, especially when we are aware that all things which come to pass according to the eternal order and fixed laws of nature. However, human weakness cannot attain to this order in its own thoughts, but meanwhile man conceives a human character much more stable than his own, and sees that there is no reason why he should not himself acquire such a character. Thus he is led to seek for means which will bring him to this pitch of perfection, and calls everything which will serve as such means a true good. The chief good is that he should arrive, together with other individuals if possible, at the possession of the aforesaid character. What that character is we shall show in due time, namely, that it is the knowledge of the union existing between the mind and the whole of nature. This, then, is the end for which I strive, to attain to such a character myself, and to endeavor that many should attain to it with me. In other words, it is part of my happiness to lend a helping hand, that many others may understand even as I do, so that their understanding and desire may entirely agree with my own. In order to bring this about, it is necessary to understand as much of nature as will enable us to attain to the aforesaid character, and also to form a social order such as is most conducive to the attainment of this character by the greatest number, with the least difficulty and danger. We must seek the assistance of moral philosophy and the theory of education further. As health is no insignificant means for attaining our end, we must also include the whole science of medicine, and as many difficult things are by contrivance rendered easy, and we can in this way gain much time and convenience, the science of mechanics must in no way be despised. But before all things, a means must be devised for improving the understanding and purifying it, as far as may be at the outset, so that it may apprehend things without error, and in the best possible way. Thus it is apparent to everyone that I wish to direct all sciences to one end and aim, so that we may attain to the supreme human perfection which we have named, and therefore whatsoever in the sciences does not serve to promote our object will have to be rejected as useless. To sum up the matter in a word, all our actions and thoughts must be directed to this one end. Yet as it is necessary that while we are endeavoring to attain our purpose and bring the understanding into the right path, we should carry on our life, we are compelled first of all to lay down certain rules of life as provisionally good, to wit, the following. 1. To speak in a manner intelligible to the multitude, and comply with every general custom that does not hinder the attainment of our purpose. For we can gain from the multitude no small advantages, provided that we strive to accommodate ourselves to its understanding as far as possible. Moreover, we shall in this way gain a friendly audience for the reception of the truth. 2. To indulge ourselves with pleasures only in so far as they are necessary for preserving health. 3. Lastly, to endeavor to obtain only sufficient money or other commodities to enable us to preserve our life and health, and to follow such general customs as are consistent with our purpose.